what I'd like to do now is talk with you about how to map out the progression of your product or service over time, thinking about milestones and dependencies across three factors: the science or the product, your market, and your business. And before I do that, I want to step back and talk with you about one of the top researchers in entrepreneurship, a guy named Scott Shane. And he identified the concept of the individual opportunity nexus. And we have a very complicated picture here. But the key thing here is it's not just about one thing. It's not about the great entrepreneur, and it's also not about the great product. And it's not about the great need. It's about the interaction across many things. So you may have a fantastic opportunity, but you may or may not be in a position to exploit it. And that means you need the right kind of people, the right kind of team, both psychologically as well as regarding your skills and attributes. And then you also need a certain economic context and a certain cultural context. It is very, very hard to start a new business, especially an innovative business, in a time of economic downturn, for instance. All this leads to a startup. But keep in mind, it's not about just any one thing. And as you can see from all those arrows, there are a lot of interdependencies. So one way to think about this is to simplify it a little bit by thinking about three interdependent task streams that lead to launch and growth. First is your product or service. Second, your market. Third, the business. Generally speaking, innovators have a very good sense of what the development milestones are of their product or service. And so you may want to think about various points in time around when you're going to do your minimum viable product, when you'll be establishing technical feasibility, when you'll be adding more and more features. Innovators generally are not super strong on thinking about what your process might be regarding the market. Who is going to be your first customer, and when are you going to start doing business with them, and in what way will that connect back to your minimum viable product or your first product or service? Similarly, as you expand, you're going to be penetrating the market more and more, and along the way, as you go to new customers or new categories of customers, you will also have to think about how you're going to be adding bells and whistles to that product or service. And then finally, there's everything else. There's the business. Are you going to create a business entity? Who are your investors or funders going to be, whether it's investors, banks, or grants? Who are you going to hire and when? When are you going to be bringing in manufacturing? To what extent are you going to be outsourcing versus insourcing? All these factors come up, and these are all very, very interdependent. Changing one of these streams means you are changing the other two. And that's okay. The important thing is to be able to map it out enough so that you can see where those changes have to happen. So let's think more specifically. One way to think about product or service milestones is to think about technology readiness levels. And this is a concept that was created by NASA back when they were doing the moon launch decades ago. And for you, it's about thinking, when will I achieve each technology readiness level? Having something that works in the lab is not going to be the same as having something that works as a prototype, especially a working prototype. How far do you have to get to satisfy regulators, both in terms of proving safety as well as efficacy? And then again, thinking about which features you will add to your initial products and when. If you look really closely at this thermometer, you'll also see that the technology readiness levels move from your technology on its own in isolation to the point where it's integrated with other technologies in the day-to-day processes of your customers. And it's important to be able to map out what that testing and user acceptance is going to look like. And that then also leads to you thinking about follow-on products as well. Market milestones include the idea of thinking, who are the first people that are going to use my product who may or may not pay for it? Although I encourage people to test and see if beta customers or test customers are willing to pay you at least a little something. Then the question becomes, who's that first market and how much can I sell through them? And then thinking about market share over time and how you can grow that. And again, keep in mind, this will have impact on your product as well as on your business because you're going to have to think about production. So now thinking about the business milestones. Intellectual property protection. This is an expensive process and it's a time-consuming process. So trying to think this through is important. Thinking about the nature of the business entity, not just what type of entity like an LLC or a corporation, but also in what state are you going to be established. You may also decide, and that may drive, there's a little bit of interaction here as well. So if you're thinking about, for instance, a public benefit corporation, there are some states where it makes a lot of sense to do that, and other states not. A lot of people who are planning to get investors will incorporate in the state of Delaware because that tends to be a state that is especially friendly to corporations. And then another factor that comes into the timing of when you form the business entity is thinking about who on the team is going to get what kind of share in the business, what kind of equity, and what decisions will they be allowed to make. For instance, you may decide that the founder by themselves, if there was a single founder and you now have a team, that the founder can't simply sell the business because they think it's the right thing unless they can get consensus from the full team. And then the question in business milestones about adding employees. Sometimes the CEO is there from the very start, but other times the leadership of the business is just really about product development, and so you'll have an innovator or inventor who really has no desire to personally build the operational and marketing sides of the business, which means then thinking about when am I adding a CEO, when am I adding marketing and sales, when and how am I adding operational expertise, and then leading into the whole idea of when you'll be adding external partners, such as service providers, which is often very early, getting the accounting firm, getting the lawyer, getting a simple thing like a bank account, which is a requirement if you're planning to apply for an SBIR grant, for example. When will you be adding distribution? When and how will you be doing contract manufacturing? Another factor is, can you get some help from other people with expertise? When will you put in place a board of advisors or a board of directors or both? So a formal board of directors are the people that have fiduciary duty to the investors in the company. And therefore, if you're a founder and you're a CEO, they're your boss. The board of directors make the ultimate decisions, including whether or not you stay in the job. You may also be seeking out business advisors, and you might have a business advisory board, or you might also be thinking about scientific advisors, people who can help you on the product or service or the benefits of your idea. And then finally, it's not at all unusual to have various types of user groups or customer advisors as well. Then we move to funding. When and where will you be finding funding? Typically, most startups start with the funders actually putting some of their own money in. In a university setting, a lot of times people are starting with grants as well. government grants that may then be initially for basic research that then move into commercialization research like SBIR and STTR grants. Friends and family may come into the mix, angels, venture capitalists, and other professional investors, commercial loans, and finally, it's not at all unusual for a new business to actually be funded through prepayments by their customers. So keep in mind, these are interdependencies. The product, the service, the market, and the business all affect each other.